Good morning. I'm Tom Peterson. I'm from the Ad Club and one of your hosts for the day. Welcome to the Unbound marketing panel, where our featured speakers challenge the conventional playbook. You've already seen some great examples. Together, they'll explore what it truly means to think unbound, moving beyond best practices and expected approaches to unlock the kind of bold, unconventional thinking that drives meaningful impact and lasting success. I would like to introduce our moderator, Esther Tetrault. Esther is the founder and CEO of Trillium, which makes hundreds of beers, spirits, and seltzers every year, and also some incredible food, including my choice for best French fries in Boston. Since opening in 2013, Trillium has grown from a small brew to a hospitality icon, now operating 4 active locations. A seasoned entrepreneur, Esther holds an MBA from Bentley University and played a pivotal role in propelling Trillium to its current success. With that, please welcome Esther.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate that. I am so thrilled to be here today. Thank you to the Ad Club for asking me to participate in this extraordinary event. And before I let these extraordinary women introduce themselves, I'll just tell you a little bit more about why I'm here and kind of frame our discussion for today. Because unbound marketing, what does that mean? And when risk-taking pays off. When we started preparing for this session today, all of us kind of looked at each other like, I don't feel like I'm a risk taker. Like, risk is scary. And so is that really what we're diving into here? And we just thought it would be so helpful to kind of set the context for redefining risk. Risk doesn't have to mean reckless. And so we wanted to kind of frame some of these stories and talk through the ad campaigns that you just saw as a couple of examples where you can take risks, but you set a framework for yourself. How do you set yourself up for success? How do you get a client comfortable with taking risks? How do you really pave the way to thinking outside the box and knowing when that's going to pay off and when you might need to pivot? So with that said, to frame our discussion, I'm going to allow Sue to introduce herself.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I think this is working. I'm Sue DeSilva, and I'm the Executive Creative Director at Digitas Boston. My entire team is right here. So I can't look at them, so I'll look over here. But anyway, about 10 years ago, I got a call to go to Digitas, and my first response was, yeah, no thanks. Thanks, but no thanks. I was at Mullen. I was very happy. Digitas was known as a digital agency. I didn't do digital. But I went over and met the team, always take the interview, and I was blown away. All of a sudden, I could see the next chapter of my career, and I realized there was a lot I didn't know, and this job was the job where I was going to learn it. Joe Pa was there with me, and I made a bet. I bet on myself in that moment, and I figured, I'll fake it till I make it, and that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. But taking that risk or that bet on yourself and what it can lead to, what it can unlock.
Marissa?
Hi, I'm Marissa Kelley. I'm the head of strategy at Arnold in Boston. Thank you. We have a lot of similarities, Sue and I, and we've discovered that about each other in this process. I, too, when I got the call to come back to Arnold, this is my second tour with Arnold, I, too, was happy. I was in Chicago at BBDO, and I didn't really see the need to make a move until I started talking to the current ELT. And the great thing is that in my time away at BBDO camp, the folks that I had come up with when I started my career at Arnold were now the people that were leading the agency. And we'll talk a lot about this today, but the positioning of the agency and the vision that they were setting was one that I was so bought into, and I felt like I was going to have a leadership team around me that inherently believed in my capability and were giving me the space to take leaps and fail fast and learn fast and grow fast. And that made all the difference, and it made it a no-brainer. And so I lead a team of 15 amazing strategists, some of whom are here today, brand, social, cultural, comms.
Marissa, I love what you said about being brave, and you put it in the campaign, be brave. In order to be able to take risks, you need an organization that supports that mindset. Can you talk to us about what that means at Arnold?
Yes, you probably saw it up there. Our agency positioning is safe to be brave. And it's based on what clients and brands often face in the market is a sort of false binary, the decision to do the smart, right, sometimes quiet thing, or the decision to do the bold, convention-breaking, sometimes risky thing. And we believe that's a false binary, that those two things aren't mutually exclusive, and if we do our jobs right, that they actually can and should coexist. So we always say if we do our jobs right, that your smartest idea and your bravest idea should be the same idea. And when I first heard those words, I was interviewing to go back to Arnold, and I was like, guys, you nailed it. You nailed the expression of who we are as an agency, because what it really did for me was reflect the team culture that I had experienced from being an intern to a junior baby planner, all the way up to head of strategy, which is psychological safety as a fundamental part of our culture. And it really starts, I think, from leaders modeling the enthusiasm for anyone who wants to work hard and is thrilled by a blank page and is energized to author something their way, not follow a process that has pre-existed or been part of a model that pre-existed them for many years, are thrilled to figure out their way of doing it, that gets rewarded. And that I think that involves putting people up for the right opportunities. I think it also involves being willing to actually coach people through the messy middle of those opportunities. There's a little bit of a sink or swim, but there should always be someone to be a sounding board in the wings. And I think we really practice that at Arnold. And, we feel like it shows up in our work, but it also shows up in our people.
I think that's so great, and it's something that we talk about a lot. Is actually, it's not, nobody gets in trouble for making mistakes. You're not making mistakes, you're learning. And so you're creating learning opportunities, you try something, and it really does start, you just said it, with leadership. Sue, can you talk to us, in your experience as a leader, how do you prepare your team and how do you set them up for success? Talk to us about one of the campaigns we just saw.
Sure thing. So the work you just saw, both for Bank of America, and the team is here that did the Jake spot, which is one of our best ones yet. Bank of America started sponsoring the Boston Marathon in 2024, and we broke out a campaign called My Marathoner then. And then the other work is our newest FIFA work. And the bank, with the sports sponsorship, there are a couple things here about just bravery. First off, the challenge was, how do you do a sports sponsorship without slapping your logo everywhere? How do you bring meaning to it? So that was really the challenge to the team. And what the bank was bold enough to do was to turn over their entire platform to the charity runners for Boston Marathon. The team, however, in the path to getting there, we had a few pivots, to say the least, including major strategic pivots. And that's going to happen. And the one thing as a creative, the biggest risk you can probably take is falling in love with your own work and not thinking you can come up with something else. Another thing is what it allowed us to do. Sometimes these pivots can be a gift. And what it allowed us to do was dig in even deeper and find a better insight, which then allowed us to find a more meaningful role for the bank. And same with FIFA. We had a team about to board a plane to shoot an anthem spot, and we got a pause. And after you kind of mourned that idea for like a minute, we had to start over. And again, it really forced us to think about, okay, what were we doing well, but what is this opportunity? And again, we found power in the question. We found this idea of ambition. Bank wasn't going to show the big athletes, the star athletes. They showed the stories of soccer, the different stories, like Antoine, the blind soccer story or player. So again, both of those instances where we had to pivot, we ended up setting ourselves up for better work. And I think such amazing credit to our clients who don't want to do things the usual way. And that's, again, a little bit, it's a calculated risk, right? It's like they just know that there's an opportunity for them to show up in a way that really resonates with people. But it does take that work to get there.
Sue, you just said it, and it must be so hard. I know I get vetoed all the time at Trillium. Like, I've had maybe 5 ideas come to fruition, and we've created hundreds of brands, but I'm shut down constantly, and I'm just like, okay, moving on. But how do you just said you can't fall in love with your own idea when you're in advertising and marketing, because it really is what the client wants. Marissa, can you share an example, talk about your campaign? How do you get the client comfortable with what you know is a great idea?
I love that work, by the way, and I love it even more now that I know that you guys had that boarding a flight experience and that resilience. We have another bank example here. For PNC Bank, we won the business in 2023, and on an accelerated timeline with a new CMO, set about the task of selling them on a platform called Brilliantly Boring and asking 60,000 people to stare themselves in the eye and call themselves boring, which, as you can imagine, was no small feat. But for us, it really started with something that we practice a lot at Arnold, which is trust in the trenches with your people and with your clients. For PNC, the problem to be solved was clear, but we had to make it clearer to executives, to folks who are not in marketing, to help contextualize what it would take for what was a primarily super regional bank who has ambitions to turn into a national bank and to be one of the major national banks alongside peers like Bank of America, but not operating with the spend or the resources of some of their national contemporaries, what it would take for them to really break through. And for me, it comes down to you have to find a way to create the environment to tell the truth as early as possible. For us, that involved a few things. Data certainly helps. Not only surfacing data that makes certain things irrefutable and unarguable about the business problem that you're solving, but also using testing as a tool. We often shy away from testing at creative agencies as a predictor of creativity, but where it can be really useful is showing early indicators that there's something happening, there's something pushing through in an idea. Testing is actually what helped Brilliantly Boring edge ahead of 2 other, I would argue, much safer platforms. It also involved, trust in the trenches for us involved a lot of early enrollment and accelerated enrollment. Quite literally, we have a thing we called Walk the Wall. As I'm looking at my 2 strategists who have been deeply involved in Walk the Wall. It's kind of analog, but we literally put all the work up in a room, and we have executives from all over the enterprise come through and see the discontinuity in their work, to see the sort of vulnerabilities of the brand in plain sight. And your eyes do not deceive you when you have that in front of you, and you have the competition on another wall, and you see the spend, and you see the celebrity power. And something like that, coupled with one of my favorites, which is a hopes and fears exercise, as a facilitation tool to have folks name their highest order ambitions and their scariest, anxious thought that comes to them in the middle of the night of what if we fail, to get that out early in the process and with your partners in the room. And we hold on to those answers. For PNC, we held on to a catchphrase that came from one of our senior clients that were after head turns, not head nods. We needed to break through. We needed to pursue something that would have the category take notice. And not defer to consensus and not defer to a sort of sense of comfort and safety. And we pull that sort of vulnerability and truth-telling all the way through the process.
I love that. That was the word that was just in my head, like, wow, what vulnerability you have to have, but what a great environment that you've created to facilitate that safety and have your team be able to say, like, okay, I'm going to put it all out there. Sue, can you tell us about some risks that you've taken in your career?
Sure. Marissa and I have talked about this a little. There's a lot of power in yes, and there are opportunities that will come along your way where you can't say anything else but yes. But there is also a lot of power in saying no. And there were 2 times in my career, both at pivotal times in my career now that I realize looking back, where I had job offers from amazing agencies that on paper made sense. They were creative shops. It was the next step that I thought I should take. But it was interesting in both cases. There was something that just didn't feel 100% right. Like my gut, like when you can't sleep, and when wake up every morning. What do they tell you to do? Like, imagine yourself resigning today. I couldn't do it. There was something that wasn't quite right. And I realized, and the thought of saying no to a CCO at an agency that I had long admired and always wanted to work at was the thing that was making me want to throw up. So anyway, long story short, I did say no. And I stayed put, and staying put meant more opportunities. I did not see that coming, but my gut was telling me it's not time to move. So saying no, and I guess the bigger message is really listening to your gut, getting to that point where you know that inner voice and you can recognize when things are just not feeling great. We question ourselves a lot. I think we have a lot of self-doubt, and I think we're so much stronger than we think. And even in our FIFA spots, people, athletes use self-talk. I still do that. Hopes and dreams, I do that every day. What are my hopes today? What are my dreams? What are my fears? On almost a daily basis, right? So anyway, long story short, I learned more from saying no in those experiences, I think, than I can still remember the exact days and how it felt. And then I felt suddenly like, okay, this is the path I'm supposed to be on.
I love that everybody feels some self-doubt at some point, and you just made me think of this, but my 13-year-old daughter, she's in 8th grade now, but when she finished 6th grade, I happened to see this. I had access to her email, parenting choice, you make your own decisions. But I saw that on her last day of 6th grade, she sent an email to herself for her first day of 7th grade with positive messaging for what she hoped for her year and the beliefs that she wanted to carry forward, like, who your friends are, be confident. And I have the chills right now. I was dying. I was like, wow, I could learn so much from her and from that. Thank you so much. Marissa, what about some risks that you've taken personally?
I had a very similar answer to this as Sue, where when I reflected back on some of the moments of risk, I inevitably went to moments where I felt the most conflict. And some of those moments were around things I turned down, opportunities I turned down. In February 2020, I turned down an offer to go work at Droga 5 in New York, and it turned out to be a very fortuitous time not to move to New York. Which I didn't know at the time, but Droga had lived on like a pedestal for me my whole career as one of those agencies that I would die to even be considered to be interviewed for. My husband and I were, we were a few years into living in Chicago, and I was really happy at BBDO, and I felt like I was, getting some great momentum. And honestly, it was a number of factors why it didn't feel right in my gut. The client opportunity was not exactly right, but there was as much on each side that was lighting me up inside and thrilling and exhilarating, and there was as much fear on both sides. And I was afraid that turning it down would be like a kind of career suicide. I was afraid that it meant that opportunities like that wouldn't find me later, that I would be somehow like blacklisted into like, you said no to the lords of advertising and you shall not be invited back. I truly felt that. But it came down to, it was not the right move for me at the time. It wasn't the right move for me personally in my life. And saying no to it, I did haunt me for a bit. I did have to do some like literal like getting into my body. I remember I went to the gym and like laid on the floor in the dark and was like tried on both scenarios and like tried to imagine myself doing one or the other. And that was actually the only thing. There was no rational pros and cons. Yeah. I had exhausted every out. So it really was like the getting into your body and feeling it that helped me decide. But the result of that no and standing on that no with 2 feet and talking to the folks at Droga sincerely about why I was making that decision, it led to an unbelievable next 5 years. I stayed at BBDO. I became a group director at BBDO. I won 5 Cannes Lions at BBDO. I presented on stage at Cannes for the Titanium. And then I got my first head of strategy offer at Arnold. So none of the things that were actually haunting me about what that no would mean came to fruition. And I think that was part of how we reframed risk as a group. Like, I don't consider myself to be a risky person as a personality trait, but I am in pursuit of an unbound life and career, and I see the benefits of taking leaps. But sometimes taking leaps is staying put.
It's so funny that you're talking about all of these things where you've said no, and I can think of a lot of examples for us at Trillium.
I think we should actually hear from you for a moment.
I mean,
I would love to know what risks you've taken at Trillium or not taken.
Sure, I have examples of both. I mean, starting a business with your husband with no experience in the field feels risky, right? But, you know, kind of reaching back to what I said from the beginning about setting up a framework for ourselves, again, maybe stupid. Our parents would have said that at the time, but we started a business to commit to my husband's dream. I had started a business for myself in an industry that I was passionate about when we first got together, and he saw how much that fulfilled me and how I was in control of my own destiny. And I'm not saying everybody should start their own business, but he was like, I think I want that. And so we decided to start Trillium, but we gave ourselves a framework, and I gave him 3 years. I said, let's try it out. I kept my business. We had kids at the same time, big mistake. And then he kept his job. And so for 2 years, 3 years, we were working other jobs, starting our family, and then starting this brewery. But that, I know you're shaking your head. It's stupid, right? But I'm so tired. But I said 3 years and we can rebuild our kids' college funds. So did we drain our bank account to zero? Yes, we did. But here we are. This past Saturday was actually our 13th anniversary. So thank you so much. So that, you know, obviously that was a personal risk we took, and we, again, set some boundaries for ourselves where we would say, okay, we've gone too far. But I think professionally, a couple of examples are, we started this Trillium Brewing Company. We were a tiny, tiny little craft brewery in the middle of downtown Boston. And if you remember that time, or if you were a customer, we could only sell growlers of beer to go. And we were like, trust us, you'll like it. But we knew we wanted to be more than just beer. We had aspirations. We actually do have a farm in Connecticut. We wanted to be a farmhouse brewery. We wanted to create experiences, but we also have 2 restaurants now, and we also have a distillery. We make spirits. And so the year we opened our first restaurant in 2018, we made the decision to drop brewing company from our name for this business who'd been recognized as one of the top 10 breweries in the world for several years in a row. Huge risk. And actually, our agency, we work with Fairfolk. If you're familiar with them, they are fantastic. They've been with us from the beginning. And I know Emily is out there somewhere. She actually worked on our newly launched canned cocktail campaign. But I remember sitting in a room, and I actually don't remember who thought it was a good idea, who thought it was a bad idea. But we took the risk to drop that, so that way we would be seen as more than just beer. And that was only, I don't even know what year it is now, but wasn't that long ago in the grand scheme of our lifetime. But our aspiration was for our Trillium logo to be seen as just as iconic and represent more than just, again, a slice of an industry. We wanted that to be seen as, you know, something like the Nike swoosh or the Boston Bee, or and still, I say that here today, that's still an aspiration. So hopefully that comes to be. But it feels really risky to move outside of that box, the thing that's made you successful. So I think that one of the ways we felt comfortable doing that is that you mentioned being data-driven. We're very data-driven, my husband and I, and it really helps to stay on top of what you're doing. We're always evaluating the impact, and it might be days, it might be weeks, it might be years, but we're looking to see the impact so that way we're prepared to make a pivot if we need to. So, yeah, I think that's kind of sums up our general approach. Before we wrapped up here, we actually wanted to take some questions from the audience, if anyone has any. Tom's walking around with a mic. Any questions out there? Any of us? A couple here.
Thank you. Is this working? Okay. You had said that, when you introduced the Brilliantly Boring campaign, that was the most extreme platform, and you had two safer options that you presented. Were those wrapped up in that concept that these are the safer options when you presented them to the client?
Oh no, they're very different. Very, very different.
Yeah. So how did you approach having those two safe options, and the one that you probably really wanted to win from the beginning? How did you balance the fact that maybe it was not said but maybe more obvious that these were the safe options versus the more out there but right decision?
I would say we actually didn't have an agenda of pushing, boring over other campaigns. At Arnold, we very much, we put forward ideas we want to make, and that includes, all three ideas that were on the table. And we would have made beautiful work from any one of those three platforms. I think that there was a spinning of plates in that process where you're testing positioning territories and you're testing campaign ideas. And I think that the whole thing, looking back on it, is like a master class in perspective setting for a variety of clients that are coming at it from a variety of experience with marketing and branding versus not at all. And in some cases, you almost have to help your client see not just the next step, but the next 5 steps, the next decisions that would be made and made easier by a certain idea. In the case of Brilliantly Boring versus the other, the data difference was nominal. The inching ahead was nominal. Rob Cohen on our research team, who's not here today, but he will forever remember the famous meeting in which we were presenting the data to the CEO at the time. And the CEO was like, okay, so what are we doing here? That one seems cool. And there's a lot more to it than that, but it was a really well argued story, a really well evidenced story that the entire marketing team at PNC, to their credit, had done an enormous, wonderful job at enrolling their C-suite team. So by the time we got to the end of that decision-making process and we're sitting down opposite the CEO with a recommendation in mind, the decision almost felt self-evident, but it was sort of anything but. And it was a lot of that trust in the trench building and that enrollment up front.
Oh, is it off now? Awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing everything thus far. I just had a quick question. Risk-taking involves a lot of energy, ups and downs, brain spinning, which takes a toll. How do you guys stay centered, other than laying on the gym floor in the dark, which is always a good solution, but how do you guys stay centered and how do you keep your energy whole in these high-power roles? Would love to just hear from each of you. Thank you.
How do I stay sane? I don't know. Am I?
Was it sane or centered?
Or
Either
centered? Oh,
either
sane.
one.
See how quickly my brain went there? How do I, well, I will say, are there any Orange Theory fans out there? Because that is new in my life in the last 5 years, and I love it. Honestly, now at this point in my career, I am so grateful, and I'm not saying that because they're here, for the team. We have an extraordinary team at both Digitas and Group Connect. Group Connect is the agency that does all the bank work. And my job now is to help them do their best work. And seeing them flourish, seeing the work that comes out, brings me such enormous pride. And that centers me. I think that's where I find every day that I go in, I know they're going to come up with something that just blows me away. And that really helps me. I just have the most confidence. And so I don't worry about those things as much anymore. And, my kids are older now. Like, I have more time. I have more time to work, which isn't necessarily great. But I do try to do things outside of work, which is sort of novel for me. But centered, I don't know, a little bit of chaos is good too. So it's probably not a great answer. My answer is the team. The team centers me. I just look to them. They have way better answers than I do. They solve it 10,000 times a day. We're in great shape, and the future is bright. That's what really brings me joy and a sense of calm.
I would add, I remember it's a podcast I listened to when I was preparing for the role at Arnold. I think his name is Josh Corda. He's like a mindfulness guy. He talked a lot. I didn't really have inner child work on my bingo card for this talk, but he talked a lot about our relationship with risk actually being a relationship with fear, and how important it is to get comfortable with fear and being outside of your comfort zone. And he talks about it a lot in terms of how you would make a child feel comfortable with fear. There was a lot of how do you slow things down, put things into perspective, and remind yourself that there is always choice, that you always have agency. So I was doing a lot, stepping into a new role that I was exhilarated by but intimidated by, of reminding myself that I can change my mind at any time, that you can take this slow, that you can take this at your own pace, that you don't have to learn everything and do everything right away, that this is the experience you have with this journey is yours and yours alone, and no one else is dictating that pace. But there was also like little treats, rewarding a child for taking on something new and trying something new. And so there's like I still practice it. That was, almost 3 years ago now. I still practice it, like after a really long, draining day, where you've been outside your comfort zone for a while. For me, it's spaghetti and meatballs, or watching Pride and Prejudice for the 27th time, or little retail fair. But I don't underestimate the like simple principle of just like really re-encouraging yourself continuously to sustain what it takes to actually stay and pursue risk after risk.
That's great. So great that I'm actually changing my original response to the question in the 60 seconds I've had to rethink that. But you mentioned fear, and yes, I would say that we all have fairly high pressure, high stress, like high energy roles, as so many of you do. And I had a learning experience, like we've been through ups and downs at Trillium, and like really high highs and really low lows. And literally, I share this vulnerably, like I have PTSD that's for real, from like some of the lows. And I actually sought counsel to like help me work through that. And one of the things that stuck with me was, what's the worst thing that's going to happen from this? Like really, like, is the world ending right now? What happens? Like, that's it. You shut up shop and you go home and you crawl into a hole. And I know that it's not that easy to say, yeah, I mean, like some people have a hard time processing and dealing with that, but what's the worst thing that's going to happen? And so at Trillium, we have a continuous improvement mindset. And I am personally, I don't need the win. I want to know, like, great, that worked. How can I do this better? What else can I do? Like, we are kind of inspired in that way. But similarly, when there are the lows or when you have a miss, I have to reset my perspective and think, like, seriously, what's the worst thing that's going to happen from this? Like, is this the end of the world? And it helps me to both handle that situation, helps me to let go. And again, from a perspective setting mindset, I did share this story before. I might have made this up, but I think I read an article once that said that you can only form memories if you're present in the moment. And I have a terrible memory. My 83-year-old dad remembers the kid's name down the street when he was 6 years old that he played handball with. But I realized, like, I'm always thinking ahead. I'm always thinking, what else can I do? And I'm just going to attribute my bad memory to that. And so I try to be present in the moment. I'm also really mindful of the fact that my kids are going to be out of the house in like not many years. And so that all helps me to kind of reset my perspective, take my own energy down a little bit so that way I have reserve, so I can bring it the next day.
think we're all set for that. I don't know if you have anything else to say, but you didn't say it. I like to have a drink to relax, so I'm surprised that didn't come out, especially one of your beers. So thank you. This is a huge crowd, so thank you everyone for coming early. I'm sure our panel will thanks the panel. We'll answer questions afterwards. Lunch is at 11:30, and then our official program starts at 12:15. So go check out the activations and the wellness lounge and everything Eastern Bank's doing, and enjoy yourself. Thank you so much.